What's the most unfair thing you've ever seen? When I was in grade school, we had a final group assignment to design a community center, with my teacher promising a lobster dinner for the group that had the highest mark. I had a bit of a crush on my teacher and thought, hey, lobster dinner. My group busted their designing hijinks after school community center, calling a long list of businesses to determine membership fees, cost of construction, community outreach programs, and a whole lot more. We even helped the special needs kid in our group write a jingle, and we got the highest mark. When it came time for our lobster dinner, my group stayed in the classroom during recess to enjoy the fruits of our labor. My teacher brings out our lobster, which was a loaf of bread with googly eyes and paper lobster claws stuck in the side. It was on that day I learned the true meaning of disappointment. You should have gone out for a real lobster dinner and invoice the teacher. Make sure to googly eyes and lobster claws to the hard copy. I took care of a woman who had cancer and was in her end days. She was young, late 30s, and had 3 sons, ages 9, 11 and 18. Apparently she had only just been diagnosed earlier that year. Earlier in the year, when her husband got the news that she had cancer, he was on his way home to comfort her and was killed in a car accident. So these boys lost both their parents in the span of about 10 months. This woman not only found out she was dying, but then was loaded with the grief of his death and the uncertainty of her children's futures. All of us nurses had to rotate care of her, as no one could leave that room and not be in tears. We didn't want to add to the boys' grief. Life is fucked sometimes. Geez. If that's God's plan, then I want to take the pen away from him. How'd the kids turn out? And geez. If that's God's plan, then I want to take the pen away from him. I have always hated that saying, God's plan. That's exactly not what I needed to hear as a 7-year-old who just lost her mother. I told the nun, well, God can write off then, can't he? On the good side, a week of suspension right after your mother dies is probably a good way to stay at home and grieve. Zero tolerance rules. A kid can literally get suspended if they do absolutely nothing in a fight they didn't start. Zero tolerance means you have nothing to lose by going all out. Forgive me, master. I must go all out. Just this once. Didn't see it, but an autistic kid in my middle school was convicted of drug possession because these kids gave him weed. Here's a similar one. An autistic boy with few friends made a new friend at school. The new friend pressured the kid on multiple occasions to buy him marijuana. The kid eventually bought 20 Tongan parangas worth of marijuana, and then was arrested. As it turned out, his new friend was an undercover cop. Absolutely disgusting police behavior. And had there been concerns of entrapment, this is a textbook example of entrapment. Encouragement of criminal behavior by an undercover officer in order to arrest someone. It's illegal and probably got the case thrown out in court. TLDR, how an innocent lady spent 2 weeks in jail for having candy in her purse, and how it could have been a lot worse. My first year working at the DA's office, there was a lady who was arrested and charged with possession of CDs, methamphetamine. The arresting officer was the best guy we had. Real by the book kinda cop, which put a huge target on his back from the other cops who were less thorough. Anyway, the arrest was made following a routine traffic stop. The defendant gave the officer permission to search her vehicle. He found a small baggie with crystal shards in it. The field test came back positive and she was arrested and her car impounded. That was Friday after 5, so she sat in jail until the following Monday for her initial appearance. That morning, she sat with the other inmates and sobbed throughout the proceedings before her name was called. You might be surprised, but that is really rare. 99% of the time, PPL are pretty resigned or sometimes just annoyed after they've had time to calm down, sober up, and the reality of their situation sinks in. So when she gets called on by the judge, she gets really loud and is crying so hard, she kept interrupting the judge, who then threatened to remove her from court until she could control herself. Initial appearances are basically just to announce charges, set bail, and schedule the next court date, so there usually isn't cause for a defendant to say much, just state whether they understand their charges. When asked if she understood, she starts wailing that she didn't do anything, that it was just candy. And you can probably see where this is going. After we concluded, I contacted the lab to order a rush on the sample attached to her case. A week later, the results came back as negative for meth or any other CDs. It was cinnamon hard candy that had gotten busted up in the bag in her purse. The defendant, being unable to afford bail, sat in jail that whole time. Meanwhile, the officer came into our office in tears over what happened. He was convinced that someone in his department had tampered with his field kits, swapping them out for expired ones, because he never had a kit long enough for it to expire. He worried that this was the perfect excuse the less scrupulous officers would have to pressure the chief of police to fire him over. And here's where things reached new heights of shittiness. My supervisor decided the way to resolve the problem was to offer the lady a plea deal of the lesser charge for possession and manufacture of an imitation-controlled substance. He reasoned that if she couldn't even afford bail, she would not be able to pay an attorney and the public defender would encourage her to take the deal. Not being a thorough kind of guy. Epilogue. I tried quietly talking several defense attorneys into representing her, but none even called her while she was in jail. After 3 more days of futilely trying to help her, I secretly went to the judge with a copy of the lab report. He ordered her immediate release without further comment. No charges were filed, and she never wound up suing everyone involved, though the defense attorneys I spoke with often threatened to do that when they wanted leverage on their other cases. I could have been fired for everything in this paragraph that I did, so it was a pretty big risk, but I feel like I stopped a shitstorm of unholy proportions and helped out someone who had fallen through the cracks in the system, monsieur. I'm so relieved you were there to help her. You saw an injustice and you did what was needed to correct it, even though you could have easily lost your job. You should be incredibly proud. Going to family court with my dad and losing even though my mother didn't even bother to show up. They also wouldn't let me testify. Fact is, she kicked me out at 16 but kept reviving child support. Court didn't want to hear it. Something kind of happened to my dad with his second wife. Skeptical smiley face. She is widely unstable and has 4 kids, all from different men. My dad is father to her 3rd kid. When they got divorced, he wanted main custody BC he could provide a more stable environment. He was the breadwinner for her and her kids while they were married. During the proceedings she was living with her new BF and her 2 other kids at the time, with no job, income. My dad not only lost main custody but she was awarded child support. I'll give her this, she is a good mom, but it's only a matter of time before her current man gets sick of her and kicks her out. She has nothing to her own name and those kids will be homeless with her, but the courts didn't see it that way. Sigh. I worked with a nurse whose wife served him with divorce papers while she was 4 or 5 months pregnant. She was going to school to be an occupation therapist and would eventually make much more money than hi monsieur. She also would steal his money and tithe this bank account to the Mormon church she went to, and he wasn't Mormon so it wasn't discussed beforehand. But while she was pregnant the 3rd kid she starved herself and didn't take care of herself in any way and their son was born severely disabled. I don't know the science behind it or how true it is, but according to him the doctors said the complete lack of prenatal care was a big cause. She didn't even have ultrasounds done to see if anything was wrong prior to the birth. He's now 5, uses a wheelchair, and operates more as an infant and won't ever really get better. Point is, she still managed to get 50-50 custody and he still had to pay almost $1,200 in child support every month. That continued after she became an occupational therapist and made easily double what he made. Even with the fantastic lawyer he had, she never paid a dime in child support. I'm from Warren, it's a huge mommy state here too. Sad in some cases when the moms are pieces of people who get wrongfully convicted and spend many years in prison. Can you imagine that? Spending half of your life in prison for a crime you didn't commit, is a charity that exonerates the wrongly convicted through DNA testing. As one of the guys who represents it puts it, we're a private charity when we should be a goddamn government agency. Honestly, if they were government, they'd probably be less useful. I worked with a guy. He was the sort of colleague that got on with everyone and loved by everyone and made everyone laugh and generally brought the mood up whenever he entered the room. Monsieur, he got banned from driving. Basically, he just found out he was becoming a father. It was his 28th birthday and his driving ban was about to be lifted, so was all excited about life. On his birthday night he had run out of booze, so decided to go to the shop to buy more when a drunk driver in a stolen car ran into him and flung him in the air so far because he was going so fast, and left the scene. He died on that spot. For someone so happy and jolly and always there to bring people up to be wiped out just like that, was just the hardest thing to take. I comes into the MVA, back 0.19 over twice the legal limit, hit another car head-on, killed the other driver and her passenger, a young couple who had 2 kids at home. They were out on a date night. He did not have a scratch on. Hi monsieur, NGL. This one made me way madder than all the others. I couldn't convince my parents to take me on a day trip to a university 45 minutes away that my school was offering for gifted students, but they sure drove us 5 hours across the state for my brother's 3-day basketball carnival. Right now, a relative of mine is trying to get all of his kids money for their education, saying they don't need to go to school but he needs to support his pregnant girlfriend. He and the kid's mom are still together, but I'm just waiting for him to get fucked up by his wife. I think I'll post a personal experience here. Not sure if it really fits the type of answers you're looking for. Well, around 4 years ago I started getting bullied in school, which caused it to be harder for me to go to school. I was also scared to tell someone, so for a while I was skipping school on the days that I'd have to meet the bullies. One morning when my mom was asking about it, I finally broke into tears and told her. She told the school, and the absolute genius of a principal I had said that she'd do something about it. Well, she had the great idea of not doing anything to stop it. It became even more harder for me to go to school, and after another while, she had the genius idea of sending a report to the CPS of our country. I was forcibly removed from my home, and sent to live an hour drive away to this mental hospital type of place so they could find out what's wrong. Well, surprise, surprise, I had nothing wrong in my head when I went into that place, and it was the bullying that caused it, like I had been saying all the time. Also, it took them a full year to realize that, and after I got out, I actually had something wrong in my head, like depression, trust issues and the like. After that there was another year of them trying to make me go to my original school, but surprise, surprise, being in depression and not valuing yourself kinda makes you just unmotivated to do anything. Nowadays I'm forced to live in a different place away from home, but here I'm at least treated like a human being and not an object that has something wrong with it.